If you own XRP, watch this immediately because something just shifted that most people are not recognizing yet. And I am not here to hype, speculate, or promise anything. This is not financial advice. I am not a financial advisor. Always make your own decisions and never invest more than you can afford to lose. What I'm going to do is lay out what is happening behind the scenes because the signs are not subtle anymore. Ripple's leadership just changed its tone in a way they have avoided for almost a decade. And if you understand XRP's purpose, what it was engineered to do, and how global liquidity cycles function, then what is unfolding right now makes perfect sense. Before we start, hit like so this gets pushed to other XRP holders, and subscribe if you're serious about understanding the real system behind the market. For years, Brad Garlinghouse and Ripple have been extremely careful to avoid talking about price. They never connected XRP's value to its role. They never publicly hinted at the economic outcome of the system they were building. They stayed silent while the market speculated wildly. But now the language has shifted. The confidence is different. The message is not about hoping for adoption anymore. It is about being ready for what comes after adoption. It is about positioning, liquidity, depth, institutional corridors, and the flow of capital at scale. And the timing of this shift is not random. It is happening at the exact moment when the ETF market is evolving, when institutional access is opening, and when large asset managers are looking for the next compliant, scalable, real-world utility crypto asset. Bitcoin ETFs opened the gate. Ethereum followed, and now major analysts, fundies, and liquidity strategists are openly discussing XRP as the next logical infrastructure asset. Not because of hype, but because XRP already has something the others do not: global payment corridors, regulatory clarity, and a decade of tested throughput in real settlement environments. When you look at what Ripple has been doing since 2012, you realize this was never about retail speculation. They built the corridors, they built the messaging rails, they integrated with central banks, payment networks, and fintech clearing layers. They solved the liquidity bottleneck that SWIFT never could. They positioned XRP not as a trading token, but as a neutral settlement instrument between currencies, banking systems, and tokenized assets. And that is why this moment feels different, because the infrastructure is already there. The rails are live. The corridors are real. And now, for the first time, the institutional liquidity mechanisms are lining up behind them. The conversation around ETFs is not about price movement. It is about access. It is about regulated capital entering the XRP ecosystem. When a Bitcoin ETF launched, billions did not come in because people suddenly believed in Bitcoin. They came in because institutions were given a legal pathway to allocate. The moment XRP receives the equivalent structure, even in indirect form, through managed fund exposure or basket ETFs, it will not be retail that initiates the move. It will be pension funds. It will be sovereign funds. It will be liquidity managers who are responsible for balancing settlement flows across international markets. And that is where the repricing argument becomes real. XRP does not need hype to move. It needs volume. And volume does not come from influencers or tweets or news cycles. It comes from the settlement of value across borders in real time at scale. That is what XRP was designed for. When institutional volume enters a system where the circulating liquid supply has been decreasing for years, the result is not a gradual climb. It is a repricing event. And here is what most people are not seeing. XRP supply is already quietly migrating off of exchanges and into private liquidity hubs. The float that is available to the public is shrinking. The rails that require XRP are expanding. The liquidity corridors are deepening, and the regulatory path is clearing. This is why Ripple's tone has shifted, because they are no longer waiting for adoption. They are preparing for activation. They know the market structure is about to change. They know what happens when institutional capital meets a constrained liquid float. They know that once ETFs, liquidity hubs, and global settlement systems converge, the market will not ask permission. It will simply move. And while the majority of the crypto world is distracted, arguing about meme coins, influencer narratives, and price targets that have no model behind them, XRP's roadmap is unfolding exactly the way it was designed, quietly, methodically, strategically, because that is how you build the backbone of the next global financial system, not with hype, but with architecture. So, if you own XRP, understand this. You are not holding a bet. You are holding a position in a system that was engineered for a world that is forming right now. The flip is not about emotion. It is about liquidity math. And when the liquidity math resolves, price follows. Not slowly, not gradually, but all at once. Now, let's go deeper into how that activation actually happens, because this is the part almost nobody in retail understands. Everyone keeps thinking price movement is about charts, TA patterns, or influencer predictions. But XRP was never designed to move like a speculative asset. Its price is not driven by hype cycles. Its price is driven by liquidity demand. Liquidity demand is not emotional, it is mathematical. And once the system needs more liquidity than the existing supply can provide at the current price, the market does one thing. It reprices the asset upward to unlock more liquidity. That means XRP does not have to replace global money. It only needs to facilitate the movement of it. And when you are moving billions and trillions across corridors, the asset at the center needs deep liquidity. Here's where Ripple's strategy becomes genius. Instead of trying to replace banks, they integrated with the bank's internal systems. Instead of fighting the old rails, they built a parallel rail that can connect to them. Instead of trying to force mass retail adoption, they focused on institutional corridors where volume is measured in billions, not tweets, and it worked quietly. While people argued on Twitter, Ripple built infrastructure that reaches into core settlement layers through API integration, ISO standard messaging compatibility, and liquidity routing engines that can automatically select the most efficient settlement path. And when a system is given a choice between slow, expensive settlement and fast, nearly free settlement, the system will choose efficiency, not because it likes XRP, but because that's simply how optimization works. And once that selection starts happening at scale, XRP stops behaving like a speculative token and starts behaving like an instrument of throughput. Think about that. The value is no longer in the token itself, but in the flow it enables. The moment real-world payment corridors flip from pre-funded Nostro accounts to on-demand liquidity, trillions that were previously locked in dormant pools are freed. That capital begins to move, and every unit of value that moves across borders needs a bridge asset. That is XRP's entire reason for existence. Now imagine what happens when institutional liquidity desks begin routing cross-border transactions, treasury movements, FX settlements, CBDC transfers, and tokenized asset settlement through Ripple's rails. Not later, not someday. But the moment regulatory clarity and ETF infrastructure provide the green light, the daily transactional volume on these rails will dwarf anything the retail crypto market has ever seen. The spike in liquidity demand will not be slow. It will not be step by step. It will be instantaneous. And here's the part most people still have not processed. The circulating supply of XRP that is actually liquid and available for purchase is shrinking. More and more XRP is being moved to institutional custody systems, private OTC liquidity hubs, long-term treasury reserves, and transactional corridors. That means the float is thin, and thin flat plus institutional liquidity demand equals repricing, not hype, not narrative, math. That is why the price move is sudden. That is why it catches everyone off guard. That is why charts look flat and then vertical, because the system is not waiting for retail to believe. The system is waiting for activation. And activation happens the moment institutional liquidity pathways become fully regulatory cleared and switched online. Not a second earlier, not a second later. The infrastructure is already built. The rails are already live. The corridors are already tested. The only thing missing is the signal. And when that signal hits, the market does not climb its way up over months. It resets. It reprices. It reflects its utility. So here it is, the signal. The moment everything we have talked about stops being theory and becomes reality. It will not be an announcement on the news. It will not be some hype tweet. It will happen quietly in a filing, in a regulatory bulletin, in a liquidity routing update that most of the world will ignore. The people who notice first will not be the loudest voices on social media. It will be the ones who understand structure, the ones who have been watching the plumbing, not the price. The signal is when institutional access and regulatory clarity align, when ETF channels, liquidity hubs, and cross-border settlement corridors all have the legal clearance to flow value at scale. When that happens, price does not rise slowly. It jumps because the market has to reprick instantly to meet the liquidity demand. This is how every asset tied to infrastructure has moved in history. Gold, commodities, sovereign currency revaluations. The shift is never gentle. It is abrupt, it is violent, it is decisive, and it is always invisible until the very last moment. And that is why patience matters, because most people are trained by the market to react to what has already happened. They wait for confirmation, they wait for headlines, they wait for permission, but by the time the herd sees it, the move is already over. The ones who benefit are the ones who position before the recognition. That is what holding XRP is. It is positioning in a system before activation. So if you are here, if understand what this moment represents, then you are not guessing. You are preparing. You are not chasing hype. You are reading the architecture. And history always rewards those who see the structure before the spotlight hits it. Stay focused. Stay informed. Stay unshaken. If you're still here with me, type "awaken" in the comments so I know who actually understood what we just went through. Like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because when the switch flips, you won't have time to explain it to anyone.